Pedersen, speaking from Damascus, informed the council that a caretaker authority had assumed power in Syria, and while there was great hope that the country now had a real chance to move towards peace and economic stability, a turn for the worst was again still possible.
We have Syria that is stable at present in many parts. Many in Damascus tells me that the law and order improved significantly after 2 initial days of instability. But stability can be fragile in many parts of Syria. And in the northeast, there are still front lines and open hostilities in which civilians are being killed, injured, and displaced. Civilians must be protected wherever they are. There must be de-escalations towards a nationwide ceasefire, as well as efforts to address tensions between military factions. The second challenge is the sheer scale of needs. Syria's economy has been ravaged by this dreadful conflict, its infrastructure destroyed, 90% of Syrians living in poverty.
Has called for an orderly transition that provided for the preservation of state institutions, that service civilian interests and provides them with critical services. A transition that was both credible and inclusive, including the broadest spectrum of Syrian society and parties, a new constitution in line with the 2015 Security Council resolution that described the political roadmap for Syria's transition, and finally, free and fair elections in accordance with international standards, explaining the importance of transitional justice.
I saw with my own eyes the dungeons, torture, and execution chambers of Sednaya prison. A testament to the barbarity of the fallen regimes towards its own people. Of course, Syrian, UN, and other organizations have been documenting this for years, thanks to the courage of survivors and witnesses. But seeing the reality firsthand was a stark reminder of the centrality of transitional justice, the need for clarification of the fate and whereabouts of missing and disappeared persons, and ensuring due process in criminal prosecutions as a necessary safeguard against acts of revenge. Without this, Syria and Syrians will not be able to heal.
Secretary-in-Chief is also currently visiting Syria to assess the country's dramatic humanitarian needs and future funding requirements. He too briefed from Damascus.
Developments in Syria, as you've heard from Geir, over the past 3 weeks has been dramatic. What has not changed is the scale of the humanitarian crisis. Syria was already one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world, with 17 million people, more than 70% of the population in need of support. More than 7 million people were displaced across the country, millions more Syrians living as refugees. Nearly 13 million people were facing acute food insecurity. The recent escalation has only added to these needs. More than 1 million people were displaced in less than 2 weeks.
Syrian journalist and filmmaker initially reported on the war when it broke out in 2011, but fled with her family to the United Kingdom in 2016.
Assad regime did not happen in 11 days or through one recent battle. It happened because of the countless sacrifices, struggles, and the losses of the Syrian people. It happens because 13 million Syrians were forced from their homes, hundreds of thousands drowned at sea. Countless others died in bombed schools and hospitals, and hundreds of thousands were detained, tortured, and forcibly disappeared. It happened when the Syrian people lost everything except their voices, their courage, and their hope. It was not announced with a military victories or grand declaration. It was civilians.
While an Israeli military operation in Syria and an incursion into a UN-patrolled buffer zone in the Golan Heights is also drawing international criticism. Israel argues that its operations are seeking to destroy Syrian military capabilities to prevent them from falling into the hands of hostile elements. But Geir Pedersen pointed to media reports that Israel had already advanced several kilometers into Syrian territory. He warned that some 350 Israeli strikes on military sites and equipment across Syria since the fall of Assad placed an already battered civilian population at further risk and undermined the prospect of an orderly transition. Pedersen also noted an Israeli cabinet plan to expand settlements, demanding that it cease all settlement activity in the occupied Syrian Golan, which would be illegal under international law. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.